Hi, it's Nadirah with Fresh Fire International Ministries, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for another Wisdom Wednesday Nugget. Today, we're going to be talking about pushing through the process. Recently, there was a series on TV called Let the World See, and it's the story of Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till-Mobley. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old Black teenager from Chicago that was killed. He was brutally tortured and murdered while visiting family in Money, Mississippi in 1955. Now, this is not a promotion for the series, and it's not all-inclusive. But what I did was, based on watching that series that truly touched me, I see Mrs. Mamie Till-Mobley as someone who has pushed through the process. I've watched some of her interviews, and I have some quotes here that I'll be sharing with you. So the first quote that I have here is where she says, "I can't remember a day that I am free from the memory of Emmett's death." And so she carried this with her, understandably, for her whole life. And yet she was able to push through the process and do the work that she did to push for change and for recognition that this type of thing was going on. Mrs. Mobley arranged for Emmett's body with the help of others and God to be returned to her in Chicago, because the plan was for that body not to be returned to her. It was almost as if, officials didn't want people to see the body. And she did receive it, and I quote her as saying, when she saw it, she said, "I didn't fall apart, but I wanted to. I knew that I didn't have time to cry. I had to do something, but I didn't know what to do." And she attributes the body being returned to her as the divine will of God. She said there was no way that body should have been sent back to me. You know, God is sovereign. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 16, verse 21, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." So in other words, a person may think that they can plan deceptive, wicked actions towards us, but God is still in control. We don't need to worry about those plotting evil against us, but we can push forward knowing that God could handle what is outside of our control, as he did in this instance for Mrs. Mobley. So Mrs. Mobley says, when she opened the casket and saw the remains of her son, I quote her as saying, "I can still feel what happened to me when I opened the casket. It seemed like every bone turned to steel. Instead of falling out, I straightened up. They thought I was going to faint. I said, oh no, I've got a job to do." When God called Jeremiah to be a leader in chapter 1, verse 10, God said to him, "Today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some you must uproot, some you must tear down, destroy, and overthrow. Others you must build up and plant." I believe that Mrs. Mobley felt some of this when she began her work. She could have chosen to sit down and accept this tragedy and breathe privately, but instead she decided to begin her work in standing up against the atrocity that happened to Emmett. You know, God often calls us to do challenging things, and sometimes they are things that are not commonly done. I quote Mrs. Mobley as saying, "I had the experience of almost a one-on-one conversation with a being outside of myself. And I have to identify that being as God, because the devil would not come to me with anything of this nature. But there is a job for you to do now," she's saying, God said to her. "Emmett has done his job. Now your job is to continue to tell the story so that men's consciousness will be aroused and justice can at last prevail." Mrs. Mobley arranged for an open casket funeral, and it's estimated that around 600,000 people came through. The wake happened from Friday evening until Tuesday around 12. And many people had to be assisted after viewing the body. Out of that, a picture of Emmett Till's body was featured in Jet magazine. Ephesians 5:1 says, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful to even think of the things, to speak of the things that they do in secret." So as painful as this experience must have been for her to endure such a long wait, she pushed through that pain, for a greater good and purpose. She talks about how she went down for the trial in Mississippi. And in describing that situation, I quote her as saying, "The townspeople contributed to a fund. There were 5 lawyers in Sumner, Mississippi, where the trial happened. They hired all 5 of them to represent the defendants. The defendants were enjoying the best days of their lives, really. They were the center of attention, and the whole town was supporting them." And she says the hate was so thick till you could feel it. Vendors were going around serving hot dogs, beer, soda water, which was most likely a Coke, and other little goodies. And we would raise our hand for something, and they would practically spit in our faces. They wouldn't give us anything, and we couldn't buy anything. Psalm 57:4 says, "My life is among lions. I must lie among those who breathe out fire. The sons of men whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword." So even though Mrs. Mobley and her family were the victims in this situation, they were treated like the ones who committed the crime. She faced death threats, blatant racism, having to use a restroom that wasn't nearby, and sitting in a hot courtroom where she could feel the hate from others, all while seeking justice for the murder of her 14-year-old son. So, Mrs. Mobley, she passed on in 2003, God rest her soul, but she didn't die in vain. The work that Mrs. Mobley began didn't end with her passing. And many believe that what Mrs. Mobley did was a catalyst to the civil rights movement soon afterwards. In fact, a Vanity Fair article in 1988 talks about how Reverend Jackson asked Rosa Parks why she didn't give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus in 1955. And Mrs. Parks said that she thought of going to the back of the bus, but then she thought about Emmett Till, and she couldn't do it. So we may be facing things that may be painful. We may be facing things that may be tiring. We may even feel like we're on a battle, on a hill, but we can push through anyway. Let's learn from this example, and let's push through the process anyway. I thank you for joining me. Please know that we love you. If there's anything we can do for you, please reach out to the ministry. The website is ffiministries.com. We'll see you next time on Wisdom Wednesday. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.